Today we're going to be talking about the difference between good and bad wide receivers. The first difference between good and bad wide receivers is showing their hands early on a deep ball. So this is something that a little bit of, I would say, inexperienced or maybe not as talented wide receivers will do. When, let's say, for example, it's man-to-man coverage, I got a DB who's inside shade, I got to run a fade, I give him a move, I take this outside release, quarterback throws me the ball with some air over the shoulder. Now, a lot of old school wide receiver coaches always tell their wide receivers, oh, when it's over the shoulder, you want to go catch this ball. Now, I'm all for catching the ball at its highest point when it's an underthrown pass. Like if I'm running a fade, quarterback doesn't maybe give me the best pass, I got to come back to the ball, I got to go up and get it. Yeah, that's totally fine to go up and get it at its highest point, but you need to trust your eyes when it is an over-the-shoulder pass. When you look at any NFL wide receiver, when they're running a fade ball, they're catching this ball almost at their chest or just slightly above their waist. They do not want to give this DB any time to make a play on their hands. That's why you want to have something called late hands. So ball's thrown over the shoulder, if I raise my hands to it and that DB's on my hip, the DB's not running like this with his head back trying to feel where you're at. He is playing us. So when he sees my hands go up, he knows exactly where to shoot his hands through. So we want to be late. Trust your eyes. When that ball's coming over the shoulder, you want to see this thing make contact with your hands, catch it about chest level so we can rip this thing quickly to the tuck. That is the biggest difference, I would say, when it comes to over-the-shoulder passes with elite wide receivers and average wide receivers. Now, before we get into the second difference between good and bad wide receivers, if you're a receiver and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we are coming out to 14 different cities across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver camps. So check out that very first link in the description below. That's so you can get all the information on where we're traveling, how you can sign up, and what we will be covering at our camps. Our next camp is going to be in Miami, Florida. Then we'll be heading out to Las Vegas, Nevada, Charlotte, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, but all 4 of those camps, you guys, are completely sold out. But then we will be coming out to Dallas, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Chicago, Illinois, Buffalo, New York, Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Boise, Idaho, and Los Angeles, California. So again, if you guys like some more information, we are coming to a city near you. We'd love to have you out to our camps. So again, check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get back to this video. Now, the second difference between bad wide receivers and good wide receivers is bad wide receivers do not have a plan off the line of scrimmage against press coverage, okay? So what do I mean by that? So let's say I line up, my quarterback's over to the left, my left foot's up, and I got a DB lined up where this like orange cone is. He is inside shade. So when I see that look coming up to the line of scrimmage, I automatically need to have a plan of attack. How am I going to structure my release? How am I going to structure my route? And it needs to happen fast. It should happen in under 1 second because of the preparation that you have done in the film room, in practice, and in your on-field drill work. So how you can develop all that is by, obviously, like I said, repetition. But a lot of bad wide receivers will come up to the line and they'll panic. They'll see this DB lined up inside shade. They'll have all this stuff running through their head, and then before they know it, ball is snapped, and then they just take off and run. And now when a DB's inside shade, how you can structure your plan is based off of his goals and what he is trying to accomplish with that specific coverage. So if he's inside shade and I panic and I just take off and go run, that is exactly what he wants you to do. He's inside shade for a reason. He is trying to take away the inside, and he's trying to force you to the sideline. So let's say you have to run a fade. Let's use the example from the last tip. We just take off and go run. He's going to get right into my hip, squeeze me to the sideline, and I'm not going to have any room for the quarterback to fade me open. Or if I'm running an out route, a comeback, I won't have any room. So what a good wide receiver knows is that when he comes up to the line, whether it's from watching our videos, whether it's from doing this type of work with his trainer, with his coach, he sees that inside shade guy, he knows already, I have a release that I like that is going to attack his leverage inside to give me space to the outside. We come up with this plan by knowing what his responsibility is. So inside shade, okay, he wants to take away the inside. The best way to get a DB to move, the best way to create separation off the line, make him think you're running where he doesn't want you to go. So his release, maybe it's a crossover, 1-2. He's attacking him, he's making him work inside, then he's off into his route. He has that plan, and that plan is automated. He sees a specific look, he knows how to react. Now, something that can help you come up with that plan is going to be film study. Let's say you're a high school wide receiver and you're getting ready to play a team that week. You should be studying film on the different techniques that the DB you're lining up against is going to use. Let's say you're the X wide receiver. You're always lined up on the left. The DB that's always on the left, you should know him better than he knows himself. You should know when he likes to play inside shade, when he likes to play zone, when he likes to play outside, when he likes to be about 5 yards off in a catch technique. You should know all those things, structure releases based off of all those things that you're comfortable with and you know that you can execute. Now, the next difference between good and bad wide receivers kind of builds off of the last thing that we talked about with your releases and having a plan. Bad wide receivers cannot react to a defender. So what do I mean by that? So let's say I come up to the line. Let's use the same exact example that we were discussing. I got a DB who's press coverage. He's inside shade. Now, let's say maybe you have a plan off the line of scrimmage. Let's say I come up to the line. Okay, he's inside shade. I want to use this crossover move to attack him and then go. But as we well know, DBs are very crafty individuals. DBs like to be very creative. A lot of DBs will show like they're in zone, then come down and press. A lot of DBs will show press, then bail off in zone. Some DBs will show that they're inside shade. Ball is snapped, they'll jump to outside shade. So as a receiver, you have to be ready to react off of those different situations. You got to be able to react, but at the same time, play fast and execute your plan of action. So what do I mean by that? So let's say his DB's inside shade, right? Let's say I got to run a fade. And we know when a DB is outside shade, his goal is to prevent the outside release. If he's lined up here, he doesn't want us to go there, force us to the inside. So we come up to the line, set, go. I start to do my crossover, DB jumps to the outside. A bad receiver will just, oh crap, and just force it and just commit to the release even when that's not the right choice to make in that situation. A good receiver can react. So let's say I go here, set, go, 1, 2, DB jumps to the outside, I just put the brakes on and go. Maybe turn it into a triple step release. But guys, you have to be able to react. Press releases, moves off the line of scrimmage. All of that stuff is built just as much of having a plan as it is of a reaction. So now, the other thing though, you don't want to be hesitant off the line, because a lot of receivers will hear me say that, so set, go, and they start to kind of panic, they don't move. You have to be able to react and play fast. So I recommend when you guys are training on the field, always incorporate different reaction drills. What I'll do with my receivers is I'll stand in front of them, I'll have like 2 tennis balls, I'll have them run at me, I won't tell them which hand I'm going to drop it in, I'll drop a tennis ball, they got to react and grab the tennis ball on the opposite side. Doing reactionary drills and working on your press release technique is how you can be unguardable off the line. The next difference between good and bad wide receivers is bad wide receivers do not know how to sell vertical or sell fade on their routes. So what do I mean by that? So let's use the example of like a 12-yard stop route, right? So let's say I'm lined up on the right side of the field, quarterback to the left at 12 yards, I just put the brakes on, I just stop, ball's supposed to be right there. So regardless of the coverage, whether I have inside shade press, outside shade press, zone coverage, off man, I have to make that DB think one thing and one thing only all the way up to 12 yards, and that's I'm running deep. Everything is a fade until it's not a fade. So what do I exactly mean by that? Because a lot of people say, oh, sell fade, make it look like a fade. But what do you actually have to do to make it look like a fade? Number one, it's going to be running hard. The mistake a lot of bad wide receivers will make is they'll come off the ball and they'll hear some bad advice somewhere like, oh, you only want to run your routes at 75%. Like, yeah, maybe if you're Tyreek Hill and you're fastest guy on the field, you could run your routes at 75. But if you're not that fast, you got to run your routes hard. I would say 95 to 97 controlled full speed. That's what you want to do. So a lot of receivers will run, but they're not going hard. If you got a DB, the goal is to get him to open up his hips and think it's a 9 route, think it's a fade route. He's not going to open up. He's just going to stay patient if he could crossover run because you're not running that hard. So we have to run hard. You want to be controlled, but run hard. Number two, they'll chop their strides. So they'll go all the way up into the break, and because they're not comfortable dropping their hips, and that's a whole nother topic that we're going to continue to cover in this video, but they're not comfortable dropping their hips, so they'll run and they'll start to chop their feet because they're trying to prepare for the break. The second that DB feels those choppy steps, he's going to sit on the route. And then last but not least, because wide receivers are trying to drop their hips, they're trying to be explosive, they'll get to the break point and they'll start to raise up so they could drop down. But a good DB is watching our hips, and when my chest raises up, my hips also raise up, so he is going to sit. A good wide receiver will not make those mistakes. He will be running hard, he'll be running in full stride, he'll keep a slight forward lean with his pad level. I tell my wide receivers, act like you are pulling a sled. You guys have probably seen that before, like a sled with a weight attached to it for your speed. If you can act like you're pulling a sled, you have good forward lean, good strides, good break point, that can help you sell vertical. And that is something I would say 80 to 85% of separation is from making that DB think that you're running a fade. Now, the next difference between bad wide receivers and good wide receivers is bad wide receivers will not win the race out of their break. So what do I mean by that? So every single route that you run, like let's use a comeback route, for example. So on a comeback route, on any route for that matter though, there are 3 phases to the route. Phase 1 is going to be selling vertical. We already talked about that. Phase 2 is going to be creating energy, which is either a speed cut, you dropping your hips, you using a move at the top of the break like a rocker step, whatever. Then the third phase of the route about is the acceleration phase. I want to get separation from the DB when I throw my cut, but I also want to keep separation by racing out of it. It is going to be a race between you and the DB to the ball. So that's what I mean by winning the race. So a lot of wide receivers are very lackadaisical out of the break. Maybe they have a good first phase, maybe they have a good second phase of the route, but they'll come out, let's say it's a comeback route, they'll break, they'll get separation, and then they stand up and just kind of cruise out of the break. They expect the ball right there. Guys, the quarterback is leading us out of the break. A comeback route is 15 back to 12. Let's say it's a post route. You're breaking on the post, the ball's not going to be one step there. It's going to be like 3 steps out of the break. So we have to keep that separation and win the race to the ball. So what a good wide receiver will do is they will finish the route. They drop into this comeback break, their arms are ripping them out, and they are driving. So if you have that mindset of I am winning the race with me and the DB to the ball, you will get way more separation on your routes. To have the mindset of I'm going to get separation with my first phase and second phase, but I'm going to keep separation by winning the race.